is Annette Franz. I am CEO of CX Journey Inc. and an advisor for Cast.app. Welcome back to our second session in this three-part series about all things customer success. We are diving in deep on this stuff. So joining me again for this session is Jeff Heckler, who is Director of Customer Success Solutions at MarketSource, Wayne McCulloch, who is Chief Customer Officer at WalkMe, and my good friend Dickie Singh, who is co-founder and CEO of Cast.app. And our session today is all about customer segmentation and customer health, two really hot topics. So this is another meaty session here. So if you saw the first one, if you missed the first one, be sure to catch it. But if you saw the first one, you know we go deep. So here we go again. So let's start with a big question. Why should we talk about these two topics? Why is it important to talk about customer segmentation and customer health? Wayne, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. Spotlight straight on me. Okay. Look, I think one of the traps we fall into is we think about segmentation. And so we have segmentation in every company. In fact, sales and marketing are really good at segmentation. We have commercial, enterprise, strategic, named, SMB. It's all about segmentation, right? So we sometimes fall into the trap of adopting that segmentation as a way of like, how do we function as a post logo acquisition organization? Like, how does our support, how does our CS, and especially, PS and other things, like, how do we structure? And the one thing that we don't recognize is the segmentation used by sales has absolutely zero impact on the experience a customer needs to be successful. And I'll give you a great example. Many companies will say, well, this is a $500,000 customer, needs a CSM. It's a big customer, like whatever it takes. Another customer company we sell to, 50K. It's not big enough for a CSM. Imagine if we gave a 90% discount for that 50K customer. It's still a big customer. It still has massive opportunity, but we're using a segmentation model driven by ARR as an example. And so what we're doing is we're falling into the trap of not understanding what is needed for that customer to be successful. And therefore the segmentation has to be different to what sales and marketing uses, because it's not reflective of the complexity or of the challenge you're going to face to actually make the customer successful. So I challenge everyone to think as a deal is done, the segmentation that then becomes important is not what was used to close the deal. It's what is needed for the customer to be successful.
Yep, absolutely. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Gosh, where to start on this one? So, well, Annette, I'll throw it into your arena with you can learn how to provide a better customer experience for your customers, learning where your customer journey can be enhanced, build better, and it's all about my people, in how I think, and it's to build better process-based approaches for my customer success team. Use data to drive more proactivity for my customer success managers and for all of our overhead. Identify promoters and look to see what kind of customer base might be best identified for helping us to upspeak and uptell our stories and move up in the market. So and it's all about driving value and accurate usage for our customers, right? So it's now they're in the product, now it's real. Things have gotten real. And let's figure out how to best use our customer base for testing and pricing modeling, possibly for repackaging if our pricing is not accurate, product road mapping and features that we want to add to additional missions in the future, and then overall growth strategies.
Awesome. And Dickie, why are we talking about this?
Yeah, I think we're talking about why are we talking about segmentation and customer health kind of together, right? And I kind of learned this from Wayne's book about the traditional segmentation, which is ARR or potential ARR base, which Wayne just mentioned, or the slightly more forward thinking, which is based on every a bunch of variables and weightages and other ways of figuring out the segment. But regardless of how you segment, most companies always have what I call a cop out, right? They have a strategic segment, which is, oh yeah, Stripe is only paying us $900, but they have the potential to pay us $900,000, right? Or something like that. So we will throw them into this thing. And then there's the opposite, which I don't realize. Nike is spending $4 million with us, right? This is an actual customer telling us, but they don't need any support because they have an army of like people with them. They want to use our product self-service. They don't want to talk to us. They don't want to do QBRs. They don't want to do EBRs. They just want a digital business review and an update. Yes, it's a huge customer. So that, so the whole ARR-based kind of thing falls off immediately. It's more like needs-based. And then I just kind of, when I came across this chapter, I think, I forget the name of the chapter, but it's around segmentation, traditional segmentation versus as the new one. Wayne helped me out here. But but that's where I kind of learned is, okay, so there is thinking around this where people are not just doing based on ARR. And I thought, and I actually talked to Jeff last time, and we were like talking about it, and we were saying, okay, just like customer health, we use like leading indicators, lagging indicators, and you apply weightages to it, and then you come up with a better customer health score. The problem with customer health is still a lagging indicator, right? When something switches from yellow to red, we do something about it. And we tried to do Cast.app based on the same formula, like, hey, it is red, but it's always too late. So what we do is like, look at the metrics that made up customer health, look at the metrics that we think should make up like segmentation, and use that, because you get a much better picture. If churn starts to go down, or if, I think we learned that from Google, is if support drops during adoption, it's a bad sign. But if support drops during retention, it may not be a bad sign. So those are the kind of things that you look at. So that's why I think we are talking about these two subjects together.
Absolutely. Great point. So Wayne, that puts you in the hot seat since he just mentioned you. Right? Thanks, Dickie. All right. So talk to me a little bit about traditional segmentation versus modern segmentation versus the future. Why does it have to change?
Yeah, I think, I have my little pet peeves in the world of customer success, and one of them is the triangle. High touch, mid touch, low touch. The concept itself is okay, but then the way it was applied, again, lazy person is like, oh, okay, well then I need 3, let's put dollars on it. And I think Dickie and Jeff and others, we've all dispelled that that's a silly way to do it. But it's easy, right? It's a cop out. It's like, yep, check the box, I've segmented, here it is, and I can explain it and all that. But actually, true segmentation is very sophisticated. And I'll give you some examples. When I was at Salesforce, there was 127 different metrics that get put in every day for every account that helps derive a health score. And the reason why they did that is because they were trying to work out that there are areas that are strong and there are areas that are weak. And any area of weakness is a potential thing that can be exploited by competitors, or it could actually start undermining everything else. So once a weakness was identified, an automatic playbook was kicked off to the account team, the success manager, and they knew exactly what they needed to do to get them back on track. And that was 95% accurate, 9 months out of knowing if there was going to be a renewal risk, right? Super sophisticated, 7 years to build. Mehmet Grover was the data scientist, super smart, knew how to go do this, but it took a long time. To my surprise, I talked to one of my peers at an identity management company, and they said, oh, we went down that route. And then our data scientists came back and said, we found out this pattern that if you deploy these 3 features, you have 99% retention. And they're like, whoa. So sales, pre-sales, marketing, success, services, support, everyone is all one track on make sure you get these 3 features. What is the customer references we can bring in? What are the examples? How do we get customers to do these 3 things? And if we do that, we're at 99% retention, right? So 2 very different models, different platforms, different needs. The fact is, they both looked at what was actually happening to give them a predictive understanding of what would happen in the future. And so when you think of how we segment and how we use health scores, it's really about understanding the data, looking for the patterns and the trends, understanding what action is needed when in order to affect an outcome in the future. That's way more sophisticated than a little triangle. And I can tell you here at WalkMe, what we're thinking about too, to Dickie's example, not every big customer needs all your army of people. They just don't. We do need to take care of them and make sure that we're touching base and we have some relationship, because if they left, that's a massive impact on churn, right? But the reality is, the smaller the customers are, typically the more needs they have from you. So the trick is, how are you going to scale? I'm just advertising webinar number 3 coming up soon, but how are you going to scale to accommodate that? But thinking of the model. So for us, we have the notion of a persistent CSM, which is different to more of a pooled model where CSMs come in when needed, when data tells us there's a problem and you need hand-holding, white glove for us, limited time, not a long time. And then you have a digital team and a scale team, and And the reality is there's all these different types of CS needed at different parts of the journey based on data. And the health score helps you understand what's needed when. The segmentation helps you know when to apply what resources out of the gate. So I think for me, the understanding that data drives all of this is the critical element.
Absolutely. Data is at the heart of all of this. Absolutely. So you answered pretty much every other question that I had for the next 30 minutes. So
Right. Well, thanks. Great webinar.
Let's just wrap that. No, I'm just kidding. Let me throw it over to you, Jeff. I have a question for you. And I think Wayne sort of alluded to this, but I think this is a really important thing to build on, which is when we segment, is it from the customer perspective, the customer journey perspective, or from the CSM perspective, or both? What's your thoughts on that?
Yes, you're right. That's correct. I think living in your customer's shoes will educate and instruct how you build out your teams. When I build out teams, I'm always sensitive to what they're humble, hungry, and smart about. And then match that to where the company is. But the first level is with the customer. So as we move away from the triangle based on NRR, I look to the customer's personas, their verticals, their life cycles, their reasons to be as customers, and then start to aligning the segmentation in that way. And then within those, especially verticalization segments of customers, looking at where they are in their adoption cycles. If we're heavy PLG, then we're going to need a life cycle that is giving all of the resources and value to the customer throughout the entire, especially upfront, right? First time to value and onboarding, and then coming back to the organization in-house and saying, well, how are we going to organize ourselves internally to support the segmented customers based on their reason to be, their use cases, their verticalization, in that manner. So building it that way. And then when it comes to the CSMs themselves, and this will help to complete the circle when we look at customer journey maps, is our higher level CSMs are working on more, not to use Dickie's term, strategic accounts, but actually strategic issues and value drivers for our customers. Not strategic because of their logo or because of their dollar amounts. And then if you have a technical account manager based to your organization as well, where you inject those individuals to drive value, both at scale and some other models, as well as face-to-face and one-to-one.
So Dickie, my question for you is, and I'm going to go back to the triangle, the bottom rung of that triangle is typically tech touch, right? So tech touch, and this is when I think about this, I think about CAST and everything that you're doing, digital customer success, right? How is digital customer success a segment? Would you segment that way? Is that different from tech touch? Just talk a little bit about that. Add some color commentary to that.
First of all, I don't know why all of you are calling it the triangle. The book shows a pyramid, but
it is a pyramid. You are absolutely correct.
Okay. So I kind of think it's wrong to think of the lowest segment as a tech touch or digital segment. And the reason for that is like very simple. If you're not applying technology, whether it's like a productivity tool or an automation tool to your entire segment, you're providing disservice to the top of the, what is it, like the executive sponsored, and then the named CSMs and the pooled and potted and like, no touch or tech touch. I think the ideal way to think of that is you apply digital across the pyramid or triangle. And when the automation is too dumb, have a CSM step in momentarily to solve those problems. And this is where, like, I think I've heard terms like combining artificial intelligence, human intelligence, emotional intelligence, like kind of together. And emotional intelligence can only come from like a CSM stepping in, providing some information, and combining all those things and solving problems. Customers are happy working asynchronously with you over digital versus as requiring them to set up a Zoom or in-person meeting every time. And we hear this all the time, like, QBRs are like too long. Yeah, they're 45 minutes or an hour, and they're too infrequent, right? So they kind of cancel each other out, right? Just like everything else. So, but that's the real thing, like, because you're saying like, oh, the CSM will handle everything, and what they're doing is like going into the same systems, collecting the data, putting it into a PowerPoint, presenting it to a human being, to the stakeholders, to the entire account, and then collecting their feedback, collecting their upsells, upsell actions, and recording it back into the system. So all of that can be automated. But you can automate it for the segment that maybe do not have CSMs. And then for the people who have CSMs, this automation could go to the CSMs and they can like explain it to the customers.
I think this is a good segue into a question that we wanted to address in the first session, but we ran out of time, and it's about reactive and proactive support and successful conversations. What can we learn from those conversations? And and if that stuff is automated, again, another very technical term, their stuff, if it's automated, how do we take advantage of that, right? Wayne, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think, I grew up where support is like, you see slides, right? Support, reactive,
Yeah.
That's what they are. Like someone has a problem, they call in, break fix, that kind of stuff. And you're like, oh yeah, I'll help you. And then with success, you're like, well, how do we be proactive? Like we gotta help a customer drive towards success. And the reality is actually there's a lot of value in reactive for success, because that's how you build playbooks for scale. There's actually a lot of value in being proactive in support, in creating an experience where the support organization is actually reaching out in advance saying, something's going to happen. We've looked at the way you've structured your architecture, the new release of the product, something, vulnerability in the web, whatever, like reaching out proactively saying, hey, prepare for something to come. And I think too often or not, we think in terms of reactive, proactive, and the reality is you need both. You need to understand the value of both. And then I would include services in that as well. And I don't think we think of it that broadly. Again, we're trying to be very black and white. We're kind of a little bit lazy when we just think about this is that and this is that, because it's easy to explain and put on a slide. But the reality is you've got to be both, and you've got to understand. And again, data drives a lot of that proactiveness, but experience drives a lot of that reactiveness. Put them together so that the reactiveness helps power the prescriptive, the predictive sort of future. That's how you get accelerated outcomes for customers, especially around their experience.
So you just changed the definition of customer success altogether for everyone.
All right. Whoops. Can we cut that? Cut that from that was not my intention.
All right, Jeff, thoughts?
My first thought was surprised that Dickie didn't jump through the screen on the beginning of the question.
Right.
Good restraint on his behalf. So for all the audience that's here, especially maybe newcomers to CS or to leadership in CS, is that your tech and your digital touches almost always translate up well, right? So they move up market well with your customer base. So that's goodness there. And proactivity is good for everyone, both your customers as well as your CSMs and your CS org. It allows them to your organization internally to concentrate on driving more value in more strategic ways, and actually is good for their development, their careers, and them mentally and emotionally. And then the last part I keep thinking about is our customers are learners at the end of the, that's what they're doing, right? They're learning a product, and then through those learnings, they're able to grow within the product. And so my friends and people in ed tech will love this, is that if we meet our learners where they are when they want to learn, and that includes all the modalities of learning, audio, video, individual and through manuals and with others and experiential. And so all of those methods and modalities of learning can be supported mainly in asynchronous fashions. And so that is good for the customer, makes better use of their time, all the overhead that goes into scheduling and two people face-to-face being on video and et cetera, et cetera. So there's goodness there. And that the ability to do that and to meet those learners and to provide those channels, supplies everyone where they want to meet and where they want to learn. And then all that content can be repurposed.
Awesome. So you just said up well. We've got upwell, uptell, and upsell. So never let it be said that you do not learn new terminology when you go to a webinar.
We're just making stuff up and now.
Yeah,
exactly.
I love it. All right, last question on this segmentation piece before we jump into customer health and customer health scores, because I think that's going to be a very hot topic for us to dive into here in a moment. So I'm going to put my customer experience hat on and bring that perspective in again to this conversation. Where do personas and jobs to be done come into play here, right? If your platform or your product isn't solving problems for customers, it doesn't matter if they're part of the pyramid, right? High touch, low touch, no touch, whatever, right? Where do personas and jobs to be done come in here? Wayne?
Yeah, so I think, what's super critical here, we often talk about value, right? So customers are going to stay for value, not just the value you've given them, but the value that you're promising them in the future. And so if we think about that from a value perspective, it doesn't matter if it's high, mid, digital, whatever, as long as value is being obtained. But one of the challenges I see is value is very objective, right? So at WalkMe, for example, we went to one of our stakeholders and said, do you know we just saved you doing 5,000 hours of training because we just put it in the application. People don't have to go to class, read a manual, go online, take a webinar, do a little gamification. They just do their job. And we saved you 5,000 hours. And the stakeholder said, I don't care. I don't care about that. What I care about is productivity. What productivity, like put it in my language, put it in my words. And I'm like, wow. So we think we've delivered all this amazing value by saving some training hours. What they want, they're interpreting value as an outcome, which is productivity, right? And so regardless of what style or how we segment or the health, it's actually understanding how to communicate the value and being able to do that regularly. And that's one of the really cool things, at least with the Cast.app, what I learned at Google when we deployed it was, and Dickie mentioned it earlier, which is QBRs are great, but that's every 90 days. A lot happens in 90 days, especially from your competitor, especially from politics, especially from all these things you don't have visibility on as a high touch CSM. You can't be everywhere, right? So the ability to actually capture value and communicate it really quickly can be done through a person or through automation. But the reality is the more you do it, the more you're sort of eliminating the whole high touch, mid touch, low touch. It's all about the value and how you best deliver that. That can be flexible based on the personas, the customer, things like that. So I don't really see it as more of a, jobs to be done in persona, other than make sure you know what's important to each persona at every point of your relationships. And I think I learned a lot from Ziv over at AppsFlyer, and he talks about relationship. He's really big on that. And it's true. It's like the relationship. It doesn't mean you come to my wedding, and I go to your kid's birthday party. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about really understanding the relationship between what my company can do for you and what your company can do for me, and make sure that we all benefit from that relationship. And that, to me, I think is a sort of missing part sometimes in the conversation.
Awesome.
Just to take it like further, the personas have one, like, for example, the C-level executives like Wayne, or they are maybe interested in figuring out the ROI. The director, the VP, the operators may be interested in, like, what's the difference between this business unit and this business unit, whereas the individual contributor may be interested in how is this specific campaign that I'm doing working, right? More specific, smaller things. So that's one area why I think like the personalizing it for the persona may matter or so.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Let's dive into customer health and customer health scores. And I'll start with you, Jeff. What's broken in customer health scores today? What should companies focus on in the future? I know this is like another whole hour-long webinar in itself. But
I feel like Dickie doesn't get any of the hard questions out of it.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
I want to see how many people I can offend. If you chimed in for segment 1 of this 3-part, then you heard Wayne kind of tramp on NPS. I'll do the same with health scores, and I'll throw in my friend NRR. I think the obsession with these metrics on a dashboard with stoplighting views has gone a little bonkers. So that's my first take. But with customer health scoring, I think we'll get into this, but let's just start very simple with 3 to 5. Let's start with something, we can go from a 0 to 5 on those. And if they have five of them, and then roll them up, give them each 5 points. scale them manually in a spreadsheet with your colleagues internally, and then roll those up to a percentage with a 0 to 100 and see how that starts to work for you. Taking on an algorithm with a BI platform and analysts and everyone who wants their input on what's important and what's not, and weigh these scores out, will drive you and everyone internally insane. And so the first part is that. The second part that is broken with customer health scores, and I'll see if I can offend anybody who's still playing this issue at this point, or this episode, is that anyone who says they can give you customer health scores out of the box and drop that as shelfware into your world is being disingenuous at best. And so this is going to be a process that is individual to every organization, that is going to move and change as your customers move and change, and as your company moves and changes. And so let's start very simply. And one of the things that Wayne often likes to say is that just act, just do, just start. And I can't second that emotion hard enough or fully enough.
All right, Dickie, at Wayne's request.
Yeah.
You.
I have like, you know, I may even stretch it and call customer health like a vanity metric, you know, and that's what it is in my mind. I'm not a big fan of, you know, composite metrics. They like even NRR or like NPS or CH, like they combine so many things and like hide the meaning behind. I think they're great to tell a story. They, you know, oh, our CH grew from such and such to such and such, or NPS or CSAT grew from here. But one difference is like NRR is like a very defined formula. NRR is somewhat defined, but as I was saying in the last webinar, if you look at like S1 documents or so, there are like at least 20, 25 variations, and I've kind of documented that as well on our website. But customer health is like very vague. Every company would have a different formula to combine to you know, do customer health or so. I think both Wayne and Jeff have given like starting points in his book and in one of his articles that I was reading, Jeff, like how you can start, but very quickly you learn that you come up with your own customer health. And I've even seen platforms, CS platforms, having like several customer health metrics, you know, and then they, but as far as we are concerned, I think we should look at what makes up customer health or what makes up NRR. Like you cannot improve NRR, but you can reduce revenue churn or logo churn, right? So those are the kind of things that I am interested in like focusing on.
So I can't just go red, yellow, green.
Yeah, it at best is something that happened a while back, right? Now it is red. What to do? But you could have avoided it if you looked at like when it was transitioning or about to transition from yellow to red.
Yeah, the red, yellow, green, very subjective. 99.99999. 100% of the time. So Wayne, here's the question for you. And you mentioned at the beginning, you talked about the 128 variables at Salesforce, and you talked about the other example with the 3 factors that had to you know, come into play. Why isn't there a fixed formula, number one? And then how do you calculate it?
Yeah, well, it's one of those false questions because I think it is a little bit of a vanity metric. It's another one of those. I just need to feel comfortable. We know who's good, we know who's not, and we know who's you know, in the middle. Who cares? Like the goal is to have no one not in the top, right? And in order to do that, you got to understand what's really happening underneath. There's a great example where I joined Looker, and they were rolling out customer success, and they're like, okay, every CSM is going to have $3 million worth of ARR, right? Using dollars again, makes no sense, right? And I'm like, why are you doing that? Like, what is it about the dollars that this account has one simple implementation, they're really big, it's 3 million. This one has 12 around the world, multinational is also 3 million, totally different, you know, experiences needed and effort and complexity. And they said, well, there was a famous venture capital person did a bunch of research, and the answer was 3 million. So I reached out to that person and I asked for the data. And you know what I found? Out of the 100 and something companies measured, not one company had 3 million. There was 200 million at the top end and 500K at the bottom. And the answer was 3 million is about where everyone lands. And so people now think, oh, 3 million is the number. And then we see this time and time again when you start aggregating stuff. And that's what a health score is. It's an aggregation. And so the health score at Salesforce, for example, they didn't use it to say your health score is this. that did a red, yellow, green, which checked a box. They actually used it because within that, there are sections that show where there's weakness and playbooks attached to it to say your job as a CSM is to improve this part of the metric. Not you go here because it's yellow or red. It's green, but this is not well. You have to go fix that. Even if it's green or yellow or red, it doesn't matter, right? Fix the problem that they are weak on. And I feel like that's what the other two people have been saying, Dickie and Jeff are saying. It's not about the health score. It's not about the red, yellow, green. It's about understanding what's underneath that. And I always say, yes, definitely start. Just if you don't know what to do, it doesn't matter. Just start. Like you do the marshmallow challenge and you always learn, the statistic, kindergarten kids always build taller ones than MBA. Like that's one of the statistics. Why? Because kindergarten kids get in there and just start building. MBA people will start, okay, we've got a whiteboard, we've got a strategy, let's work out the team dynamic. Like, no, just start. And you're going to get to a better solution than where you began. And but I do think there is value in doing the activity. I do think there's value, but don't put the emphasis on the result. Put the emphasis on what's underneath driving behaviors as an organization. That gets lost sometimes, and that's sort of the key part, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff, thoughts on that before we jump to the next question?
No, we're good to go.
Okay, Dickie, anything else on that?
Oh, this is good. Thank you.
All right, awesome. And I think what you just said there, Wayne, is a really good segue into the next question, which is about predicting churn, AI, and machine learning. And you mentioned it's an aggregate score, and there's that data behind it and everything. So I think that is a good segue into how do you predict churn? How do you use AI and machine learning to get some answers? And Dickie, I'll throw that out to you to start with.
Yes. Get one out of the gate. I love
it. So when Jeff was mentioning, Wayne was mentioning that Salesforce used 127 variables to figure out if churn is going to happen 9 months from now, and it is such a difficult model. It depends from company to company, and that's why Salesforce has not productized that and made it available to everyone else, because it's a complex thing. So the thing about AI is, there are two models, maybe three, but one is you're relying on past data. You're relying on learnings from data, and you're looking at the outcomes, and then you're using that as a model to say, hey, what else matches that, right? So that's and we call it supervised learning or whatever, right? And then there is clustering and unsupervised learning, where you're just going into the data and finding issues and figuring it out and surfacing it and saying oh, when these are there's a cluster of these, 80% of the customers have the same problem, let's find a solution. And then there's newer things which is self-supervised learning. For example, the easiest way to explain is the cat's eyes are always going to be above the nose. So you don't have to train the AI data, right? The data itself can start figuring those things out. It may not call it eyes and nose, but it will have some sort of representation. In other words, the signals are found directly from the data, right? So I think that's where we are right now. We are still stuck with supervised learning and cluster learning. When we move on to self-supervised learning, things will become clearer. But I don't see AI kind of taking over for this, because every company is different. Every company's goals are different. Even if you take I forget who said that, if you take two companies in the same market, in the same segment, the way they compute customer health may be totally different, right? So those are my thoughts around how AI and ML can be used.
Awesome. Jeff or Wayne, you guys want to weigh in on that before we wrap up?
I'll just say, look, I'm a big fan of AI plus HI, the artificial intelligence plus human intelligence is the dream combination, right? Just HR in itself can get so far, just AI in itself can get so far, but actually bring them together, great complement, because AI can do things at scale and speed and insight that an HI can't, but an HI can take that and inject empathy, can inject personality into dealing with people and challenges and complexities that change by the minute. I'm talking to someone, they're happy, and then the next minute they're not because they got a phone call and suddenly they're in a different headspace. It's very difficult to just be pushing out automated stuff. And I think bringing that together is the secret. Agreed.
Jeff, final thoughts on that?
It's pattern recognition and versus outliers through massive volumes of data, and then allowing your folks to decide how to help direct that. Some of the best decisions that I've seen made in organizations that I've been a part of is when we were able to give BI into the self-service used hands of our CSMs, and to give them a tool that they could use to help to uncover trends at scale. And so some of the more self-service BI tools are very good at that. So being able to sift through that and enabling and empowering your CSMs to bring that, as Wayne says, the HI into AI was much more successful than something grandiose at scale.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you to the three of you. And thanks everybody for joining us for this session, the second in a two-part series. Be sure to check out the first one if you've missed it, and get ready for our next one, which will be coming up very soon. We will be going in depth on scaling customer success. See you then.